The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Inspire FM. You're listening to Inspire FM 105.1 FM. This is Friday Night Live with me, Zaffar Iqbal, standing in for Hafiz Shaban, and that man you heard just before the break, Abdul Akbar. Inshallah, he'll be joining us a bit later on today, if he can make it through the traffic that he's trying to beat today, inshallah. So, once again, welcome to Inspire FM and welcome to Friday Night Live. Action-packed show as usual, inshallah. We're going to talk about, as usual again, I would say, things that have hit the headline which are potentially of interest to the Muslim community. So we're going to talk about, and I guess this is applicable to the Pakistani community in particular. There's been allegations in the Daily Mail about a particular ruling family in the Pakistani political landscape, spheres, etc. And the Daily Mail has made an allegation. We'll find out what that allegation is or was, and whether there's any substance to that. We're going to talk also about the ongoing detention, the case of detention of Muslims, of Uighur Muslims in China. Nations and states are now lining up to either support or condemn the activities being experienced by the Uighur Muslims in China. We will obviously have representatives from various organizations across the world who have links and connections with the Uighur people in China. And also much talked about the Trump tweets, go back tweets, as they're referred to, referring to a number of American citizens who hail from another part of the world, and whether telling them to go back constitutes racism or not. So this is another headline-grabbing tweet from Trump. We're going to talk to correspondents from America, inshallah, to give us their view. And also, if you want to join in, inshallah, ring in 01582 481822 or WhatsApp 0779 481822 to participate in our discussion. Inshallah, is always valuable feedback from our listeners, local and international, or global, I would say, through our website. Inshallah, join me, and basically we can have a discussion and share your views and perhaps make a show of this show, inshallah. Okay, first topic of discussion today. We're trying to get hold of basically a representative from Pakistan who can talk about the allegations, the Daily Mail allegations that were made against Shahbaz Sharif. Allegedly, I say allegedly because there has been threats of action or legal action being taken by the family against the Daily Mail and the article that was written. So the allegation made is along the lines that the Sharif family siphoned off money that was intended for earthquake relief, and basically use that to basically effectively fund the activities of their relatives of the ruling party. Obviously, that has been denied, vigorously denied by the Sharif family, Shahbaz Sharif family, and the party to which he belongs to, the PMNL party in Pakistan. And we've also had, obviously, a response back from DFID. DFID is the organisation within UK responsible for dispersing donations to developing countries, and also in this particular case, DFID, Department for International Development, DFID is what this is short for. And they've actually denied that the money was misappropriated, and I think Daily Mail, the journalist, holds by his particular version of the story. and basically the story is along the lines of the fact that the money was sent from DFID, and also donations, etc., were sent to Pakistan, and the Shahbaz family or Sharif family allegedly used what's called the Hundi system to siphon off the money and have it transferred to sort of international accounts. So the Hundi system is basically the people opening up accounts in Pakistan and in various countries as well, and using the remittances, legitimate remittances that people send, basically are used to effectively take money out of Pakistan. So I think we'll talk to a representative from Pakistan on detail how that works. But basically, the way that works is that a UK basically an account is opened up within the UK, and effectively any remittances that are sent from the UK by legitimate people, remittances to families in Pakistan, effectively what happens is that the rupees are given to them through their local Pakistani accounts, allegedly from siphoned off money, and the UK pound-based remittances go into the UK-based pound account of the families. And that's one way of automatically, I guess, transferring money from one country to another. It's a principle that's used in legitimate businesses as well. And I do remember times when there were lots of local organizations, basically seemingly unregistered organizations, were able to send money, large sums of money from UK to Pakistan. And one did wonder how the whole system works, but it's becoming more clearer now that some of the bigger organizations were able to sort of hold accounts in different countries, and the money didn't actually leave the country. The pound valued money went into sort of UK based accounts, and the rupees from the Pakistani accounts were then dispersed to the local people up there. So that's the way the Hundi system, I believe, works, and it continues to sort of work like that. So we're trying to get hold of Usman Zahid, the BBC Pakistan producer. Obviously, trying to get hold of him urgently to talk to him about this particular allegation or particular story that broke. It's quite I guess it's quite a sort of a striking allegation. I think many people would argue that it's believable. Whether it's actually happened or not, I guess it's a case for courts and whatever to decide. And the statement that we received from DFID, quite categorically states that UK only gives money or gave money. Payments were made for results. So the support that was sent to the earthquake appeal was based on results, i.e. what that meant was that money was only handed over once tangible results were shown, i.e. buildings were built and schools were completed, etc., and then work was audited and verified. So this is the position of DFID, and they categorically allege, or they categorically state that money was basically used as it was intended, and the UK taxpayer got its money's worth. So we have got Usman on the line, inshallah. So let's just get him on. Assalamu alaikum, Usman. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum assalam. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Shukriya, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for joining me today. I know it's quite late in Pakistan, so it's quite a bit of a hassle for you. So the story that we wanted to cover today was the allegation made in the UK-based paper Daily Mail about Shahbaz Sharif allegedly taking money from donations, or UK donations effectively, for the Earthquake Relief Fund. So I just wanted to get, I guess, your view on what the public in Pakistan think? Is it a believable story, or is there evidence of misappropriation or not? What's the feeling in the minds of the general public?
To be honest, this story was initially made some headlines, local media in Pakistan. In the current scenario when there's a lot going on in terms of courts and cases against these PMLN party, Pakistan Muslim Nawaz and its leaders, Shehbaz Sharif and Nawaz Sharif, former Prime Minister. So it was in headlines, and this ruling party has really was keen, and every minister almost tweeted about it that this another proof, and now it's a very credible newspaper in UK saying this story. But to be honest, when after initial kind of phase, which was for everyone was they were catching up like all the ministers and everyone saying, oh, this Shehbaz Sharif has done this, everyone done it. When people started checking details and cross-checked what is exactly going on in the story, what exactly being said in the story, and that story was about the the fund released or the support which came for the earthquake victim, which was clearly earthquake was in October 2005.
Yeah.
So at that time, everybody knows that it was Musharraf time, and Musharraf was the chief executive of the country, and he was controlling everything there.
Okay.
So that, then people started doubting its story. And then, if you check the headline, if the top line of the story is money, it itself is a question. It's not like some allegation or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Shehbaz Sharif and everyone, basically they denied any wrongdoing. They said we didn't do anything, and it was just a mere allegation. And they, after initial statement, they issued a statement, detailed statement, in which they said we're going to sue this paper, which is making this fake allegation against us. So, people, and of course, the biggest thing happened when the FID, this, they issued a rebuttal.
Yeah.
FID, if you know, this is the Department for the International
Development,
Fund, by the UK. This is an organization which is, works in development projects and especially in education and infrastructure. They, give fund to different countries. So they issued the rebuttal, and they clearly said that it says, the funds were basically all the funds were released for the reconstruction of the earthquake and relief. That was, to the department. It was well placed, and it was properly, kind of distributed, and all the work were done. Basically, all the
but thing is that
audited.
The Daily Mail correspondent or the person who wrote the article, he quotes an individual from UK who said he basically was responsible for transferring money to the account. So it's basically it's a testimony effectively based on an individual who's so does that not count for anything? Is it in the minds of I guess the media and the general public?
This guy who was being quoted in this article was Shehzad Akbar. He's Imran Khan's asset recovery unit chief. He's equivalent to a federal minister basically here.
Okay.
So he gave whatever the evidence was. Again, so he just said that okay, this is maybe they are trying to dig out further on these lines, and he didn't give any substantial evidence. This is what is said in the story as well. And, they made on Sunday, they didn't do any kind of investigation. They didn't check any further kind of evidence. They just publish it. And as I said, it's just maybe, this. Everybody here now doubt that the ruling party in PTI,
Yeah.
They deliberately done something just to basically change some headlines. So basically shift some pressure because, there was a lot of scandals going on against the judges who are doing investigation against the cases of the North League. So this was one day thing, and after rebuttal again, it's totally fizzle out, and it's saying, oh,
the chap reported in interviews somebody called Aftab Mahmood, who is basically seen as the witness, the person who actually witnessed all of these transactions being made to the families. So he's not related to the PTI, is he? He's just some chap, right, who was involved in sending money or remittances to Pakistan, right?
I don't know this character of that, but I can tell you the first thing was the big doubt about this signing,
right?
Which is 2005, and elsewhere came. And of course, this was not just for 2005 because in 2009
it carried on. Yeah, I think the earthquakes happened repeatedly, and I think the fund is a continuous fund rather than a fund that was specifically for that time, right?
In 2008, Punjab government was basically the PMLN was ruling Punjab.
Yeah.
So of course, Shehbaz Sharif was the chief minister there. So I mean, what we have been hearing, and we have a big impression here that every the NGO working in Punjab and every project which was started by the non-government organization in Punjab was finally delivered. It was completed, and money was well spent on the project.
But I know for a fact because Inspire FM or Radio Ramadan, as it used to be in those days, we raised some money, and lots of money was raised in Luton and lots of the surrounding areas within UK and the world for the earthquake that happened in basically Muzaffarabad area. And I know for a fact, I've been to Muzaffarabad, and the amount of money that was raised, the amount of development that you see, there's a big gap. There's a big sort of mismatch between the amount of money that was sent by governments, by individuals, and the amount of development taking there. So, in people's mind, it's believable that money didn't reach. And I think at that time they were saying that it's the military that basically scooped lots of the funds, etc. So it looks like it's a normal kind of thing that happens, and it's, at least from our distance, is believable that some of this money is being siphoned off into private accounts.
Well, I agree with you. There were a lot of protests about this irregularities, about corruption in distribution of money, and which was raised. And there was a donor conference, I think, in 2007 in Pakistan, where a lot of countries came and they pledged a lot of money for the reconstruction. And it was generously offered by all the countries, from everywhere. In Europe, from everywhere, money was pledged for this reconstruction, and it was a big contribution for everyone. And it's blaming one person. It's just saying Shehbaz Sharif done something. It's not, I think, the justified or something like it's just to blame someone for doing something. It happened definitely there was corruption and a lot of questions were asked, but never it was audited, never edited, never asked questions, because it was mainly Musharraf was controlling everything. If you remember, General Musharraf was ruling.
He was the
executive of the country. The election was basically conducted by the General Musharraf at that time. People's Party came into power, and still Musharraf had a lot of control on everything.
Yeah.
Even people ask question about the coalition support fund, which was basically coming from Americans for the to find for the Afghanistan conflict, basically to support and all this kind of thing. But this. If you're talking about corruption, of course corruption was there. People didn't get that much, we visited after 10 years in Muzaffarabad, and there are a lot of places, a lot of schools still, in ruins. Basically, they didn't get, never got funds to rebuild. This is a situation on ground. It still is the case. Basically, funds were not there. So, but blaming someone sitting in Punjab, it's not. I think Shahbaz Sharif was not supposed to build thing in Muzaffarabad or somewhere in the AJK.
Okay.
So this is again. It should be something more kind of.
So broaden the discussion out. I mean, there's obviously, if you read the newspapers from Pakistan headlines, literally every day some politician is effectively accused of some sort of dodgy dealing. The latest one is the former Prime Minister, Mr. Haqqan, and he's been alleged in sort of doing wrong dealings in the LNG sort of case or the contract.
Deal with Qatar.
Yeah, deal with Qatar. So again, what's the general mood? Is this seen as a government trying to fix the corrupt system, or is the government seen as being destroying the opposition, so to speak? What's the view? What's the general view?
These arrests, they didn't yield a result so far. All the investigation, the prosecution of the former prime ministers like former President Zardari.
Yeah.
See, now, today when we're talking about, there are two former prime ministers and one former president. They are in jail. There are 11 former kind of PMLN leaders. They are in jail.
Yeah.
There are a lot of corruption charges on them. What exactly has been proved? This prosecution hasn't got any proof or they couldn't prove anything against them. So still it's ongoing process. This judicial system is really now people seen it as a political vendetta which is used for the political opponents.
Okay.
So if they recover some money, then people will maybe believe that, okay, this justice has been done. They looted definitely this money and now they're bringing it back. But we don't see that phase is coming anytime soon. They didn't recover a single penny from Nawaz and from Zardari, and now they arrested Hassan Abbasi. I think whenever this pressure built on government because their economic policies are failed and this dollar price is increased and the inflation is into double figure and now it's gone to 13%.
Yeah.
So there is so much problem on economic side that only thing they think they do is to release pressure. They just arrest some other big leader. Again, it make headlines. They say.
So you're saying is politically motivated, but the thing is, obviously, I have relatives and I have people that I talk to on a regular basis who are from Pakistan, and they 100% believe that the politicians are corrupt, right? There is no doubt about it. The question is whether that could be proven or not. So isn't what the government is trying to do now, top down, trying to clean the system up? Is it not that case rather than being a case of destroying the opposition?
About corruption, that's right. There's a lot of corruption on every level. If you go to any government office, any this institution, there's definitely corruption. It's not a question. Of course, these ministers and these governments were involved in embezzlement, lot of funds were given to their own favorites and etc. It's even the PTI government, people who are sitting in current government, they were in previous government as well, and there were allegations against them of corruption. But they are not kind of doing any investigation or anything. There are NAB cases against sitting ministers and everyone. This Khosrow Bakhtiar is and there are a lot of other people who are involved in NAB cases. But they are just, taking up and arresting people from, opposition parties. So that's one thing. So corruption, are they trying to root out the corruption? Are they going to address? No, they are not. They are just selective kind of, targeted kind of operation going on. That's the feel here now. So if they were really meant to root out the corruption, they should have done arrest their own people, people who are in the power government and basically who join basically this government, coalition government, and they have to, go with some people with a bad reputation, etc. So they're not doing anything against them. So if they say, they are going against corruption, this is not true.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a good point you make, and I think that's a good point that you could generally say if it wasn't a political vendetta against the opposition, then why aren't they arresting their own people? But there is that kind of like what do they say, cutting your own roots type of a situation where if they went, it's a question of priorities, isn't it? If they went with their own people, they'll be basically be out of government very quickly, would they not?
Yeah, this is the point basically. The political compromises are being made. So if they are not like strong party, they are not a single party government, they are coalition government.
Yeah.
So they have to make a lot of compromises. So it's we'll see. I mean, what exactly they're going to do in like the next phase. I mean, if they are really meant to do this to address the problem of corruption.
Yeah.
Corruption again, another problem.
I've run out of time. I'm sorry, Osman Saab. I have to just say thank you very much for taking your time out to speak to me. It's fascinating. I'm sure we'll speak on other occasions. This is a topic that will run, inshallah. We'll talk again. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Atif Nawaz, and you're listening to an Inspire FM podcast.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. You're listening to Inspire FM. This is Friday Night Live. My name is Zaffar Iqbal. Before the break, we were discussing the allegations made against the former brother of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shahbaz Sharif. The allegations being that he had misappropriated money and funds from UK's DFID, Department for International Development, money which was destined for earthquake relief was misappropriated by them using the Handi system of sending money from UK to Pakistan. Now, we had a conversation with Usman Zahid, who's a producer for Pakistan. I guess the key message he was saying is that some of the dates did not line up with when Shahbaz Sharif was in power, and I think a lot of these allegations are now being seen as basically government's attack, I guess, on opposition rather than a drive for rooting out corruption. Although corruption is rampant, corruption is widely sort of believed to be widely sort of prevalent. This is not seen as being an attempt to root it out because the results haven't been achieved yet. Nobody's been convicted, and no money has been returned. I guess there has been a convict because Nawaz Sharif has been convicted, but no money has been received. So it seems like a bit of a strange criteria, to actually judge the success of a particular drive. The fact that no convictions were made or money was returned. Money is never going to be returned. These people who stole money and basically sent them abroad in very ingenious sort of ways and hid them among accounts in lots of different countries, they're not going to willingly give it all up. So the best you can hope for is, in the eye of the public, in the eye of the population, discredit the politicians. But it looks like these people still seem to get away with it. They seem to be sort of still held in high regard, regardless of what has taken place. So anyway, hopefully the situation would change. Hopefully the message will be sent that you'll have to hide your money in ever more clever ways, because there would be people out there to try and uncover your techniques, basically, of hiding the money. Anyway, we're going to move on to a slightly different topic. We're going to move on to another very important topic, I would say. This is about some messages or some letters have been signed from the UN in support of China and what China is doing to the Uighur population in terms of internments, etc. So I have Ashley Starkin-Seth on the line, who's a founder of the Stateless Dignity Project, and she's going to talk to me and explain a little bit more about what that's all about. Hi, welcome to the show, Ashley.
Hi, Zaffar. How are you?
Good, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me today and taking the time out. Hopefully you can give us a little bit of background in terms of what this story is about. Apparently there's 35 states, including a lot of prominent Muslim states, who have actually supported China in the mass detention of the Uyghur. What's behind all of that?
Sure, no problem. Well, last week, essentially, a group of about 22, I believe 22 exactly, democratic countries, mostly Western countries, wrote a letter within the Human Rights Council condemning China for its treatment of the Uyghur, including mass detentions, re-education camps, this sort of thing, and especially, taking children away from their parents, putting them in orphanages, and they sort of, trying to indoctrinate them and basically destroy their heritage and their culture, something I would call sort of a slow-burning cultural genocide.
Yeah.
So this, first letter was sent, and then this week there was a rebuke, as you mentioned, coming from 37 countries. And like you said, many of them are also Muslim countries, as well as some in Africa and others around the world that actually were defending China and praising what they called its excellent human rights record. Sorry. They said, we commend China's remarkable achievements in the field of human rights, which is, in a way quite shocking, but I also think in a lot of ways not very surprising that we would see that from, the countries that I've seen who have signed this letter, and I think they have a lot of interest in doing it. But it's something sort of unheard of in the Human Rights Council, to have this kind of division.
Sure. So I mean, if Pakistan, you can understand because Pakistan is kind of economically linked to China. But some of the other countries, I think it's a bit surprising. I think is Saudi one of them? Saudi Arabia being one of the countries that signed.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is, but I haven't been surprised by, I think this has a lot of links and parallels to what we've seen going on in Myanmar, which I spoke about last time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
talking about the Rohingya. What you see there is countries that are essentially more interested in the economic exploitation and economic opportunities. And when you see a country like Saudi Arabia, which is a Muslim country but exploits so many migrant laborers, that sort of thing, basically indentured servants. It's just really not surprising to see, it's unfortunate, it's so sad, but, to see a Muslim country not supporting another Muslim country when they claim, to share these, another Muslim, minority. When they claim to share so many of the same values. But ultimately, to me, it comes down to the economics of it. And I think that applies to a lot of the others as well, like some of the African states that signed.
Was Turkey one of those who signed a support letter for either support letter or a letter of condemnation? One or the other. Was Turkey one of them?
I would have to check on the list again. I was just trying to pull up the list because I saw it earlier. I'm sorry, I don't recall. Okay. You wouldn't happen to know, or? No,
I did. Like yourself, I did a bit of a search. I think that the story is just general headlines, and a few countries have been pointed out in the stories.
Yeah.
But that would be a headline, isn't it? Because I think the people of Uyghur are Turkic people, and they have a connection with Turkey, and I think that would surprise me if Turkey was one of the 35 countries.
Definitely, especially with they've kind of let up on this, but they were trying to become part of the European Union and show sort of how democratic and liberal the country is. It's something the EU wasn't really having, but it would be surprising when Turkey wants to present itself in this way to do this as well.
So I guess what
I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So what would be? I mean, obviously there's been photographs being shown of big buildings being built, and what is China's argument basically? I mean, there's lots of evidence that you can see that something is not quite right, and we've spoken in the past, and we've interviewed people of Uyghur origin, and they're saying things which are not normal are happening there. Right? What is China's excuse? What's their reasoning, right, for saying what they're doing is the right thing?
Well, they do, I think, what a lot of countries do, and even, say the United States, where I'm based, does. And it's this sort of alibi that's very common to authoritarian states where we, create states of exception, they call it, or emergency resolutions that they, sort of sell to the people as rooting out terrorists or, countering extremism. But again, in this case, much like the Rohingya situation, there's really, it's just not a valid argument. I mean, it's such a small fraction or minority, and in the Uyghur case, I don't think I really know of any at all. The Rohingya, it's almost nothing, but I don't really know of any such actions. It's just China's interest in creating a uniform Chinese identity, and the way they're going about it is just absolutely, shocking. I mean, not that they should ever be erasing any culture, but the lengths they're going to do that is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, and this East Turkestan, as it used to be called, or Xinjiang, I think is the region in China. It's actually has been autonomous for quite a while, and it probably still is the autonomous region. It's been treated like an autonomous region, right? So why now this drive to basically create a uniform, homogenous type of a culture among them?
In my opinion, frankly, it really echoes, again, a lot of what we're seeing all over the world. I think they're really capitalizing, much like, Myanmar and other countries, on this growing global Islamophobia and, ultra-nationalism, and especially religious nationalism. The idea that I just feel that globalization is going at such a fast pace now with all the new technology access we have, that people are becoming, really afraid and easily sort of convinced by the powers that be that their culture will be erased or affected, that there's too much intermingling going on, and that, we have to get rid of anyone who's unlike us, which is just a really sad thing to see all over the world. But I think countries like Myanmar and China, both here, are just really capitalizing on that sentiment and saying, all right, this is the time that we can pull this off and get away with it. So
I think what you're saying is that that these regimes were, I guess, in a way, not in any way similar to sort of the viewpoints that people have in the Western countries, in the sense that they're a little bit more extreme in trying to sort of, I guess, enforce a particular uniformity of culture. But what you're saying is that seeing that the Western nations heading in that direction is giving them that added fuel to go even further. Is that what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I certainly don't mean to blame all this on these countries. Obviously, there's human rights violations going on all over the world, and I'd be the first to say in my own country as well. I mean, I think, a big part of it is the election of Trump sort of empowering this sort of ideology all around the world and echoing what we see from authoritarian regimes. But in countries, in Europe, in the U.S., in Australia, you're also seeing this nationalism. Just the other day with Trump's statement, for example, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but essentially telling 4 minority congresswomen to go back to their own countries. I mean, things like that are just absurd and unheard of, but, people are getting away with it these days. World leaders everywhere are getting away with it and managing to make people afraid and say things that they would normally never say. Yeah,
it's quite, to be honest, it's become a common currency now, isn't it? I think it's becoming more and more acceptable. But I guess one of the arguments I've read in the newspapers, just trying to sort of give an alternative point of view, is that there is actually economic sort of, I wouldn't like to use the term war, but economic sort of, a head-to-head engagement, I guess, between China and America. And then what you're seeing now is more or less disinformation against China. I think this is what some of the newspapers or some Chinese sources would say is disinformation, and what they're doing is nothing out of the ordinary. Is there evidence out there to suggest that what they're doing is actually out of the ordinary and unacceptable, as opposed to something that's quite the norm? And I think what we are seeing, the lenses to what we are seeing is what's actually sort of being misinterpreting the events.
I would say, to me, it's probably tied with the Rohingya ongoing genocide for most extreme and unusual things we've seen. And in terms of the economic aspect, yes, in a way, I do feel that there's a bit of a war there because China's big up-and-coming, power and getting really, really powerful on the world stage economically. And I also would say that I think that's the reason we see, especially, say, a lot of African countries signing on to this.
Yes.
With things like I believe it's called One Belt, One Road, something like that initiative.
That's right. Yeah.
Where they're doing things that they call human rights, activism around the world, but it's very different to what we've seen in the past. They're doing things that sort of benefit them at the same time. Like, for example, maybe doing some mining or oil development, but then creating infrastructure to get what they're producing or taking from these countries, which the countries are in a way grateful for, a nice highway, but it's really to benefit China, to bring it to ports and that sort of thing.
Sure. So I guess I think we'll probably sort of move on to another topic and talk about the comments that you made about Trump and what his remarks were made. We'll touch on that because since we got you online. But I guess from the broader community, this attempt that was made by the 22 countries initially to try and, I guess, condemn what China is doing seems to be, a rallying call, so to speak, for people to actually try and, put more focus on what's happening there and create that sense of outrage. Well, what else can we do? What else can a common person, I guess, like yourselves, can we do to highlight the plight of the Uyghur people?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it is about, both individually creating awareness, just like you're doing right now, frankly, and then by what your listeners are doing by listening to this. And I hope that people will come away from it and sort of share the news, pay attention to this issue. Much like the Rohingya issue has fallen off a lot of people's radars ever since the major crisis, the sort of apex in 2017. But I think it's important for people to both educate themselves and share the news. When Facebook is becoming the main source of news for people all over the world, it's important for people to really look for the truth and share that. But beyond that, if people want to contribute in some way, I think that essentially giving to organizations or getting involved with organizations that are working to fight these kinds of issues is a really good idea. Also, writing to or contacting your representatives and encouraging them to place more pressure. China needs a lot more pressure, and China is honestly the most difficult country in the world, I would say, to maybe tied with Russia in terms of, or India maybe, in terms of applying human rights pressure. Especially just because of all their economic power. They sort of have their thumb on so many countries in the world. It's really, really difficult to get them to move. No,
absolutely. I think that there's probably not a lot in terms of protests and holding up signs and whatever. I think the only thing they probably would understand is if there was, I guess, a little bit more backbone from some of the Muslim countries to say, well, actually, hold on, there is some economic interest, but, we do have a connection here, and then we, speak up about it. And those are the things that are likely to have an effect rather than, I guess, conversations and sort of highlighting the information, etc. I guess it's the countries, the Muslim countries.
Definitely.
Yeah. Would you agree, sir?
Yeah, I think both of them. I'd agree with both about other Muslim countries, but also, I'm not sure that would be taken as seriously by both China and other countries in the world. But when we see, say, some of these countries that are really exclusively benefiting economically, like some of the African countries that are non-Muslim, I think those countries, also condemning it would be very important. But it's all, we're probably, I assume we have a lot of listeners, or most listeners are from Muslim countries, or are at least Muslim. Then I think, yes, it's extremely important to pressure, your government to the best of your ability, of course, in a safe way, depending on where you're at, to do, to act on this sort of thing and act properly.
Sure. Okay, let's move on to the other story that you mentioned about Trump's go back remarks. I mean, there's a lot of, I guess, articles written about his comments, but what's happening in the background? Why has he chosen to sort of make these remarks against what seems to be quite quite junior representatives, I guess, from the Democrats? Why has he chosen them, and why this particular sort of comments he's made? What's happening? What's the background?
Well, besides his just managing to get away with it, as he's been doing ever since he was elected, and before now, just being able to, I think that he essentially, it helps to rally his base, and there's nothing he loves more, in my opinion. I'm getting a bit into personal opinion, and I do feel strongly about this.
Sure.
But there's nothing he loves more than, say, rather than actually governing, holding a rally or something like that, that's really where everyone's cheering for him and boosting his personal ego. So I think it's much more about personal ego than anything else. And he has managed to free up people who sort of lift the voices, sadly, of people who normally wouldn't say such racist things, and convince them that it is a threat to their security and to their way of life and their culture. And so it's just another, one more example of him getting away with something so racist and getting, so much support and forgiveness, essentially, from people who otherwise would have been afraid to say those kinds of things. And now they're very empowered to do so.
So I guess you get the impression that people who don't live in America, if they're here, his kind of rhetoric all the time, is giving an impression of America, which I know is not true. Speaking to like yourself, and the fact that an immigrant got elected, into sort of the equivalent of the parliament in America, seems to clearly indicate that there are people who have different views, and America is a place of diverse views and opinions and whatever. But he seems to be taking the lead into painting in America into a kind of like very isolationist, very hot-tempered, and very sort of, I guess in a way, very sort of discriminatory nation, which is not true.
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's quite embarrassing from a traveling perspective. I would like to say so much that I'm Canadian when I travel. But yes, he's creating this image, unfortunately pretty successfully, about the United States that goes completely against our history and heritage of, being sort of melting pot that welcomes refugees, despite, a not perfect history, but certainly better than what we're seeing now. And he's just... how can I put it? He's creating this this image that's not really shared at all by at least 50% of the population, at least.
Sure.
And a lot of people say, well, I don't totally agree with everything he says and does, but I like, this and that. I have family members themselves who vote just based on economic interest and don't pay any attention to this sort of thing. But, in reality, I'm guessing you're aware that Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote.
Sure, yeah.
But we have this sort of backwards electoral college system. So it's not a reflection of what America really is, I don't believe, but it is a reflection of very large segments or minority of opinions that are dominating here and around the world right now.
Sure. And I guess the reason he's chosen this particular theme and this particular line of I guess in terms of these tweets is because the election is looming, I guess. And he's probably got that on his mind, and in terms of trying to sort of G up his support base.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he likes to keep them sort of fired up, and again, why he does so many rallies and is doing more of that. He's trying to just maintain this sort of firebrand image he's created. I think all hope of him, acting. I mean, I've read articles about how his administration just tries to rein him in. It's sort of like preschool in the Oval Office every day, frankly. Sure. I'm sorry, some of these things sound quite harsh, but about how his administration is just trying to rein in everything he does. I think he's absolutely gearing up for the next election, which is a bit ironic considering, he said the first time around that, he had stated sort of under the radar that he didn't really want to become president. He said it would be the best PR stunt ever, and that there were rumors that he actually wanted to start a television network, sort of like an extreme Fox News, and was actually shocked himself when he won. So said how he was shocked how hard the job was.
But I guess what he says does have an impact on the ground, because I can imagine, I'm not sure it's not the case, but I can imagine a lot of the minorities are feeling quite scared in America.
Absolutely. You may have heard of, I believe it was just last weekend, the raids by ICE, the immigration authority here, that were done in a number of major cities in the U.S. And again, it really shows the divisions here because, most urban areas and larger cities were very opposed to this, but it's also where many immigrants live. So a lot of cities like Chicago, for example, refused to participate or assist in these raids. The federal government went ahead and did it anyway, as it was ordered by Trump, but without the support of most, I think, local cities and states that didn't support this kind of action.
Sure. So, so I guess there's that side of it, and I guess general fear I would have thought as well, because I mean you do get sometimes WhatsApp messages and images and whatever of Muslims and I guess other minorities being targeted by people who kind of look up to Trump and his viewpoint. I'm pretty sure that's probably not the case everywhere, but there are some places I guess where that kind of language is very dangerous for people.
Yeah, I mean, it's very shocking to me to see, a member of certain minorities, and I feel that the party loves to show these types off, but it's also, in my opinion, again, a lot of people acting out of economic interest when they claim to support these policies by Trump or sort of have convinced themselves that they agree with them. Sure. I mean, everyone's, from, say, a racial or religious minority to, for example, I'm familiar with a gay man who's a Trump supporter, and that, I find very surprising, of course.
Actually, I've run out of time, so I'm just going to have to thank you now. Okay. Thanks for taking out half an hour of your time, extremely busy time you have, and perhaps we'll speak again on another occasion. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers.
Great. That'd be wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. Great talking to you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. You're listening to Friday Night Live on Inspire FM 105.1 FM. My name is Zaffar, and before the break we were discussing the plight of the Uighur people, and we were talking about the 35 or 37 or so countries, a lot of them Muslim, who had actually supported China in its treatment of the Uighur Muslims. And we were speaking to Ashley Stark in Seth, and I guess the key message she wanted to convey really was around the fact that a lot of these countries are economically dependent on China, and they would basically support China on those bases rather than their connection or the potential link they might have with their Muslim brethren, the Uighur people. Anyway, I want to move on to the next topic of discussion. And that topic of discussion, I think we briefly touched with Ashley Starr, but we do have a representative from CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations in America, regarding the go back remarks that Trump made against Ilhan and a few of her colleagues. Basically remarking about their views and I guess their countries of origin. We do have Ibrahim Hooper who is the National Communications Director. We want to hear from him what his thoughts are on the latest tweets from Trump. Assalamu alaikum, Ibrahim.
Wa alaikum salam.
Jazakallah khair. Shukriya. Thank you very much for joining me today. So this has made the headlines here in quite a few newspapers. I guess a lot of people are getting a little bit used to outrageous tweets by Mr. Trump, but this I think is gone to the extreme, or the next extreme at least anyway, until something else comes along. Well, what's your thought, and what's the thought of the Muslim community of America in relation to these tweets?
Well, it's not just Muslims.
Sure.
Really, Trump and his white supremacist administration have targeted all minorities. Just today,
Sure.
We're having to issue a statement because the Trump administration is going to cut to zero the number of refugees admitted in America next year. I mean, think about that. If you're a refugee, you can't go to America. I mean, it's absolutely unprecedented. You'll probably have a carve-out for Norwegians or Swedes, but only if they're blonde, I think. It's really outrageous that the rally where they were screaming, send her back, it was like something from the 1930s in Europe or from the KKK back in the 1920s here in America. It's really frightening what we're seeing, and the Republican Party is saying nothing. There's absolute overt, hardcore racism being espoused by the most powerful man on the planet, and they say nothing.
Right, and what I guess the question is, he says these things, he seems to get away with it. He's got his support base. That support base appears to be liking what he's saying. Is there a portion of American society which is actually trying to stop this man?
Well, the majority of American society is trying to push back against his hatred and racism and white supremacy and anti-immigrant views and Islamophobia. That's the majority of the country opposes it. The problem is he has the White House and he has the Senate, and they're more or less zombies for him to whatever he says or does. And you have this hardcore 35% of Americans who want to drag the nation back to the false, idyllic 1950s, before the Civil Rights Movement, before large-scale immigration, to this, alleged white paradise that they think was back there when it really wasn't back there. But that's what Trump is offering them as a demagogue.
And why are people lapping up? I mean, they've seen history. They've seen what that kind of thinking has done to in history in Europe and I guess in some parts of America. Why are people wanting to hark back to those days? Some of them, at least, anyway. When you have the president stoking their fear and anxiety about being overtaken by the brown hordes, that's what you get. Instead of trying to bring the nation together, this president does everything in his power to divide people along lines of race, ethnicity, immigrant status, gender, you name it. If he can divide along it, he'll do it. And what's the 70% or so of the populace? What are they doing? And I guess elections on the horizon. I think that will be a test of his popularity, I guess, at the end of the day. But I guess organizations like yourself, what are you doing to sort of try and project an alternative image of what America is?
I mean, today when he's going to propose no more refugees, because obviously he sees them as brown refugees and black refugees.
Sure.
We're going to speak out against it, and that's what we can do as an advocacy and civil rights organization. But as you said, the elections are the only thing that may cure this. And if through some kind of magical trick he gets reelected, I fear for the state of America.
It does sound like it's getting quite dangerous. It's not just America. I think there's lots of fallout. I think in the UK as well, you're seeing a similar sort of trend, and people making similar sort of not quite as outrageous, but similar sort of gestures in that direction. So I guess as an Islamic organization, are you building sort of alliances with other organizations to try and see if there's anything that could be done, I guess, to oppose this kind of general direction in which America is heading?
Oh yeah, I mean, as I said, it's not just Muslims that are targeted.
Yeah.
It's immigrants, it's African Americans, Hispanics, women, you name it. If you're a minority, he's against you. And he'll have some policies against you. So it's great for coalition building because basically everybody says, well, we got to stick together or we'll be hung separately, you know?
Sure. And how, I guess, his target, his focus of attention, although recently is much more towards like you said, the brown people, etc. And I think what you're referring to is the refugees from Central America and South America. But it must be making a lot of people very nervous. A lot of people from other countries very nervous and very sort of fearful of where this is going.
Yeah, like I said, if we have more than 5 more years of this guy and his divisive and racist and white supremacist tactics, I don't know if we'll be able to recover on the other end. I mean, people forget how fragile civilization and civilizational norms can be. Sure. I mean, before the Civil War in Bosnia, everybody was sitting at a cafe in Sarajevo drinking coffee, and then the next day it was spiraled down into chaos. And we forget how fragile these things are and have to be protected, and norms mean something. And with Donald Trump, there's no norm. The only norm is his ego.
Yes, indeed. And I think you pointed to quite an apt example there, because you had the former Yugoslav organization, or the country, pretty much seen as a stable country, and then overnight it kind of ripped itself apart. And that seems to be sort of an example of how things can go badly wrong, really, isn't it? And I guess it looks like, I think
things can spiral out of control very quickly, unfortunately.
Indeed. And I guess it's incumbent upon every person who, I guess, shares an alternative view to actually make that view heard. Jazakallah Khair, Ibrahim.
I mean, it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad when we have to rely on UK officials to stand up for our own elected officials here in America.
Indeed.
Against the President of the United States.
Indeed. Jazakallah Khair, Ibrahim Hooper, for taking the time. I know you're quite busy. You're very busy indeed.
If people want to sign up for our email or anything, go to cair.com and subscribe.
Indeed. So you can repeat that again if you like, just in case.
Yeah, C as in cat, A as in apple, I as in ivory, R as in Robert.com.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Jazakallah Khair. Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Bye-bye.
Right, okay, so that was Ibrahim Hooper from CARE in America, and I think the picture is painting of I guess, a minority, I would say, and I have to say a minority of people in America who tend to be mesmerized by this, by Trump and his particular angle in his pushing, and fearful of the fact that it's heading towards a dangerous conclusion. Hopefully things might turn out differently. Hopefully sanity will be restored in the next elections, and I hope the ordinary Americans would speak up and basically show America for what it is, hopefully. Okay, well, we're going to return briefly back to the previous topic of discussion we had regarding these 37 countries or so who have signed a UN letter in support of China. We have now with us Mehmet Tohti. He's the co-founder of the World Uighur Congress and is a prominent Uighur Canadian human rights activist, and it has been for quite some time. So we're going to try and see if we can get some, real details of what's actually happening in China and what's the state of the population there. Assalamu alaikum, Mahmoud.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for joining me today. So can you give us, I mean, these 35 countries have been roped into signing a letter. Can you tell me whether this is going to make any difference at all in how China behaves in a positive or negative sense at all?
If you remember the past February, Turkish Foreign Minister, Mr. Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, then he made a statement at the United Nations in Geneva. He said that what is happening for the Uyghurs in East Turkestan under the Chinese rule is the shame for humanity. So basically, there are more than 35 countries, the most of them Muslims, now signed a letter supporting the Chinese government's treatment of Uyghurs, which is regarded as a shame of humanity. They are supporting the shame of humanity.
Sure, indeed. It does seem like that, but it's in response to the letter from, I guess, mainly Western countries who criticize China. And I guess the fact that there are a number of Muslim countries who are among the 35, I think you're quite right, it does show a little bit of indifference. And I think that's been
quite shocking, just in one aspect, because those Muslim countries, there is no way that they are unaware of the situation of Uyghurs. More than 6,000 mosques are demolished. It is clear from the satellite images. And the Quran, Holy Quran, is confiscated and burned. The Islamic identity and the belief of the Islamic belief of the Uyghurs are totally forbidden and banned. Even the Islamic names, Quranic names like Muhammad, Aisha, those names are banned from the newborn babies or from ordinary people. So when this kind of heinous crimes against Islam, against Muslim identity, and against the population is taking place by the communist China, and on the other hand, the Saudi Arabia and some other Muslim countries like Pakistan, they are supporting China. It is beyond belief. It is really knocking my conscience.
But why are they doing that? I mean, clearly, this information you're saying is not new. It's been repeated over and over again by, I guess, many correspondents and many eyewitnesses. So why are, I guess, Muslim countries not taking a different line, I guess, from what they've taken?
I think just calling them a Muslim countries, it is... I don't know. I cannot call them a Muslim countries, honestly, because we are Muslim, because Quran teaches us Islam, and the Quran teaches us how to be a Muslim. And the Prophet Muhammad preached the Quran and taught us how to be a Muslim. And being Muslim, as there is a Quranic verse, even it goes contrary against your father, you have to stand up for justice.
Sure, indeed.
And one name of the Allah is Adil, right? And you have to stand up for justice. And when more than 5 million Muslim Uyghurs are in concentration camp, it is not news anymore. It is well-known fact. Even Pentagon and some other European Union and United Nations, all of them are talking about that. And so when more than 5 million Muslims are in concentration camp, and just forcing them, Chinese government are forcing them to denounce their religious belief and ethnic identity. And on the other hand, some Muslim countries are standing in line with the Chinese persecution of Uyghurs, even going much further and offering support to Chinese government. So it is really difficult in this case, just call them a Muslim countries. And if Uyghurs are Muslim, and just because they are Muslim, they are being persecuted, then we cannot put those two, the Arabic, Saudi Arabia or Pakistan, and the Uyghur Muslims in the same basket of Muslims.
Indeed. So
I'm terribly wrong here.
Yeah, so I guess I think the Chinese view is, and I think we probably sort of had to balance the argument. Their view is that they're not actually doing anything which is affecting or impacting the religious belief. They're trying to sort of create a more cohesive society, and they're doing no different to some of the Western countries are doing in terms of making sure that extremists and terrorists and whatever label they choose are basically weeded out effectively. That's their argument. But how true is that argument, and how realistic is that argument?
There's no any base of that argument, because I can tell from my own personal experience.
Sure.
And I was growing up in a small city in the southern part of East Turkestan, which is called Kargala.
Yeah.
And there was a mosque I used to pray when I was there, more than 500 years old mosque. That mosque was demolished. Wow. That mosque has nothing to do with the Chinese government's policy. And it was the mosque standing there since 500 years ago.
Sure.
And my mother is 78 years old woman, just a simple woman, and a mother of 8 children. And she did nothing wrong, and I lost contact with her and all of my 37 direct and extended family members, and they did nothing wrong. They just simply ordinary people. And I don't know thereabouts, whether they're alive or dead. And my teachers and my classmates and professors in the concentration camp, and some member of Chinese Communist Party in the concentration camp, writers, religious figures. So basically, Chinese government was trying to paint a different picture. But one thing we had to ask Chinese government to do, if they want to clear up their position, just open up those camps for foreign media instead of showcasing certain number of model concentration camps. Why they don't allow the Western media or any independent organization just to go and visit all well-known, coordinated area. Just go there and see what's happening, and let them ask what has happened for 800 years old mosque, Kiria Mosque in Kiria City.
Right. Okay. So I think this is a good point you make, but they would say basically that it's the Western media which is trying to distort things, because there is an economic war between America, I guess, and China, and that's what's driving this.
No, I don't think so. And as Uighur organization, we have been pushing this tragedy since a long time.
Sure.
And it is not that easy for Western government to pick up this issue because of the scale and the scope and the extent of atrocity, and they have to stand up. And it took almost 2 years for us just to convince them that there are more than 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. Then we brought up the issue to their attention. Come on, do not exaggerate.
Sure.
He tried to stay away, just to put them distance. And then there are some satellite images, and there are some Chinese, ethnic Chinese reporters. They went there and started to report, and report surfaced on mainstream media. And then slowly, now we are in the phase of acceptance to reality. And the Chinese government is trying to blame the Western governments. It is not about the Western governments. It is about the humanity and the human consciousness speaking right now.
Sure.
And at the time of 21st century, more than 5 million Uyghurs, not 5,000 or 500,000, put in concentration camps without any rights. And this is something that beyond your imagination. If Chinese government wants to come up clean, very simple. Open up the area so we can refute the Western propaganda. Let's see, at least let the Chinese government allow me to speak to my mother by phone. Let me know whether or not my mother is alive. It is very simple.
Sure. Okay. Mohammed Saab, I'm running out of time now, so I've got another guest on. Jazakallah khair for your comments. I think you've been very articulate in actually presenting the case for the Uyghur. Thank you for taking the time out and speaking to today. Jazakallah khair.
You're welcome, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bye-bye.
Assalamu alaikum. Right. Okay. So we're going to move on to basically the other topic. So we've been flip-flopping between this topic and then the tweets, I guess the go-back remarks from Trump. We have now Muhammad Atif. He's a Washington-based journalist. I think we've spoken on a number of occasions before. Assalamu alaikum, Atif Saab.
Salam.
Thank you, Shukriya, for joining me today. I know you got a busy sort of schedule. So we had Ibrahim Hooper on early on. He's the National Communications Director for CARE, who basically sort of made some comments and views about these remarks. To be honest, I think not many people are surprised by these type of remarks that Trump is making, because people are getting desensitized to them. Are you getting that feeling as well? It's no longer a headline anymore because you kind of expect that kind of stuff from him.
No, it is a headline. If sitting outside of US and thinking that no one is talking about it in the country, no, that's not true, sir. It has been a headline in America for the past 2 days. Sure. Even today, the news is discussing these remarks. The news is discussing why Trump did not stop the crowd in the rally. They chanted, "Send her back," for 13 seconds, just sure. 13 seconds. And the press is questioning that why President Trump did not stop them, although President Trump has said that it wasn't me, it was the crowd, but he was speaker, and the media in the United States is definitely questioning it, discussing it, and actually, if you read all big papers, you'll see that the media has covered this topic at a very large ground.
Well, what are people going to do about it though? So he's quite averse to criticism. He doesn't really care what people think as long as his core supporters are happy. They seem to be happy, right? From what we've seen so far. So what is the rest of America going to do about it?
You see, for every politician, the first objective is to keep their support happy, and that's what he's doing. That's what you see all across in politics. Yes, there are things that may not be right in my view or your view or in the view of President Trump's supporters. So as a politician, he has to do what he has to do to win the votes. But if you want to talk about how the people of the United States have reacted to it, you must have followed the news coverage of
sure.
in America on this issue. Even today, if you go to voanews.com, the main story on voanews.com is this story. Although Voice of America is funded by the government, but even VOA would not shy away from discussing this issue.
Sure.
So, what would we do as President of the United States? Yes, we will question it because this is not, against the values of the United States. What happened in that rally, the slogan that the crowd chanted, it is against the value of the United States. Ilhan Omar is a naturalized American citizen. She's an elected member of the U.S. Congress, and so is other women. But you see, the political differences have taken this shape that, it has reached to a point where we've seen these kind of acts in election rallies. But of course, I'm not a spokesperson of President Trump. I'm not a spokesperson of any of the Congress. I'm not a spokesperson of the press either. But you see mixed reaction. Yes, President Trump's base is against immigration, illegal immigration. They think that the illegal immigration is hurting America, but legal immigration is part of the United States Constitution, and no one can stop it.
Sure. Okay. Atif Saab, it was going to be a short discussion today. I've run out of time. I need to go into a break and follow on to the next topic. So it's always a pleasure talking to you and discussing these things to you. And I think we've covered this quite comprehensively. So Jazakallah khair for your comments and discussions today. Perhaps on another occasion we'll talk more. Assalamu alaikum.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, listeners, after the break, there's going to be the Hajj topic with Brother Rashid Mogradia. Assalamu alaikum, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Friday Night Live on Inspire FM 105.1. Now, you'll probably be asking, that doesn't sound like Brother Zaffar. It isn't. Unfortunately, Brother Zaffar has another prior appointment. He sends his apologies to all our listeners out there. So I've just stepped in as a very poor substitute to cover for the last segment of the show. So, if you're listeners, thank you for tuning in to Inspire FM 105.1. As mentioned, this is Friday Night Live. Now, if you've been tuned in, thank you for tuning in. And if you have been listening since the start of the program, thank you for staying tuned. So, at the top of the program, we were discussing how would I better describe it? Some of the corruption in Pakistan with Usman Zaid, BBC producer. Then, as Brother Zaffar managed to speak to Ashley, from the founder of Stateless Dignity Project, an international human rights genocide lawyer, regarding the Uyghur in China and the 35 countries who signed a declaration in defense of China's policy against the Uyghur people. And then we managed to speak to Ibrahim Hooper from the who's the National Communications Director and spokesman for the Council of American and Islamic Relations, who are going through the racist comments made by Trump on Twitter, just at the beginning of the week. I then also managed to speak to Mehmet Tuhti, the co-founder of the Uyghur Congress, prominent Uyghur Canadian human rights activist, again about the situation of the Uyghur people and what the political situation is now. But just before we went to the break, we managed to speak to Muhammad Atif, a regular guest on our show, and he again touched upon some of the comments and the reactions to Donald Trump's go-back comments that tweets he made. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into Inspire FM 105.1. Just before I start, I have a very, very, very special guest. And those of you who are fans of the show will know exactly who he is. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Abdul Akbar.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brother Ahmed, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for giving us your time. I know you were supposed to be presenting today. Unfortunately, due to a variety of things, I know you couldn't manage it into the studios.
It's all good. You're all on today's show. First is Zaffar pulled out.
I know. Subhanallah.
One thing that's going right, though, Brother Ahmed, is you. Oh my God, we found some brand new talent on Friday Night Live. Congratulations.
I always maintain I'm a very poor substitute to yourself and to Zaffar, to everyone who presents at Inspire FM.
Great, bro.
No, thank you very much.
No way. You did great.
Abdul Akbar, thank you for taking us the time to be on the show. The show, we missed you. Very much missed you. The show misses you. The Friday Night Live is not the same without you. I know you are heading back into the UK. Just to tell us a bit about what you're going to be doing today.
That's right. Jazakallah khair, Brother Amir. So basically what's happening, I literally flew over from the Gulf. As you know, I'm living in the Gulf for the last couple of years. And I flew over in my capacity as the Chief Education Officer with the Council of British Hajjis. And we're doing a tour of Hajj seminars in the UK this weekend, starting obviously with a place that I hold near and dear to my heart, of course, Luton. So tomorrow we'll be having the 3rd annual Hajj seminar in Luton, and I want to really call out to brothers and sisters who are going on Hajj this year, or if you know somebody going on Hajj this year, this is a really important seminar to actually attend. That's happening tomorrow, that's Saturday, that's tomorrow, at the Dallow Road Community Centre, and we'll be kicking off the seminar at 12 o'clock. It's a 4.5 hour long seminar. It can go into 5 hours. And what we do, Brother Amir, is we don't just cover the ritualistic aspects of the Hajj, but we also cover the spiritual aspects of the Hajj. So it's not just about the what you do to perform Hajj, but also the why you do what you do. And that's a really important connection that I feel is seldom made when people are learning on how to perform Hajj and also to complete this journey of a lifetime. SubhanAllah, these days, I remember back in the 90s, people used to go on Hajj, and it was a big deal when hundreds of thousands of people used to go. This year, the Saudi Arabian government are actually expecting over 2 million pilgrims to land in Jeddah at the Hajj terminal and be processed for this journey of a lifetime. So it's a big deal, and we'll be teaching people how to perform the Hajj according to the Quran and Sunnah, and we'll also be teaching people the why you perform Hajj. Why do you do these rituals? What's the historical connection? For example, for when you are doing tawaf, what's the historical connection between the tawaf and actually why you are doing it? We also cover aspects on the Kaaba as well. Now, everybody knows that obviously the Kaaba is this, black, currently it's a black cube-like structure, which every single Muslim around the world, including in the UK, we face at least 5 times a day when we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But did you know the Kaaba actually didn't look like what it does today?
No, I did know it was slightly different to when the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam built it, and then to the time of the Prophet.
Very different.
Yeah.
It was very different, and subhanallah, even if you tour the Kaaba right now, and this has got nothing to do with Hajj, by the way, knowing about the different parts of the Kaaba and what the Kaaba looked like. But when you learn about the story of the Kaaba and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the inspiration to Ibrahim alayhi salam to actually build the Kaaba as a house to worship him, and we remember the ayahs of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran to actually perform the Hajj and Umrah for Allah in Baqarah 196. I'm going off memory here. But it's important to really make the connection between the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what we actually do as rituals when we follow the footsteps of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and of course the guidance and counsel of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the last and final prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a really important seminar. Those people who have actually been to the seminar last year and the year before have come back to us at the Council of British Hajj saying it really transformed their view on Hajj and how to perform the Hajj. Of course, we go through all the different parts of the Hajj. Not just that, we also go through how you perform the Umrah as well. So, Hajj is interesting because when you start to learn about Hajj, you learn that actually there's 3 types of Hajj. And the most common type of Hajj that we do when we fly over from Europe and the US and in the UK is called Hajj Tamattu, which is basically when you combine the days of Hajj, when you basically perform Umrah before you do the Hajj. So in essence, you perform, or you have 2 intentions. You have the first intention to do your Umrah, and then you come out of that intention, and then when the days of Hajj begin, you actually make another intention to perform the Hajj. This is called Hajj Tamattu. It's actually regarded as one of the most blessed types of Hajj that you can perform. But of course, there are different types of Hajj. For example, for the people who live in Makkah or for the people who live in the area surrounding Makkah, they don't necessarily combine Umrah with the Hajj. They just perform the Hajj itself. And there are some other minor kind of differences between what we would do in terms of our Hajj as Hajj Tamattu and what those who might not be doing the Hajj Tamattu do, for example. So we will teach those who attend tomorrow in Luton all of these things. But most importantly, we're going to make the connection between what you do, spiritually to what you do ritualistically, physically, when you are actually performing the rituals as part of the Hajj. And to me, that is when the penny drops. When you start to understand the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and how Ibrahim alayhi salam was commanded by Allah to actually build this house and to actually leave his wife and his child in the middle of a barren land, and effectively, when you learn about the story of Safa and Marwa and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Quran very clearly, tells us that Safa and Marwa are signs of Allah. And if you actually learn about the story of Safa and Marwa and you see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means when he says, Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah, you actually realize that, wow, subhanallah, these mountains, these hills that we go around in following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam isn't just a ritual. My goodness, there is a story behind this ritual. And when you understand the significance of that story, you start to realize the ritual and you start to feel that ritual when you are within it, and you start to really concentrate and understand what's happening, what you're doing. So that's why I would strongly suggest people who are thinking of going on Hajj, even you should join us tomorrow in Luton. So if you're listening to us in Luton right now and you're thinking of going on Hajj next year, or even if you are going on Hajj this year, maybe you're leaving on Sunday, maybe you're leaving in the next week, because a lot of people are starting to fly out now to the Holy Land. You want to make sure that you join us at the Dallow Road Community Centre in Luton. We're starting at 12 o'clock, and we're also going to be in Peterborough as well. And you've probably heard the ads on Inspire FM and also on Salam Radio as well. But if anybody wants to sign up, you can do so at cbhuk.org/events. That's cbhuk.org/events. Otherwise, you can just turn up and we'll sign you up and also give you entry to the event as well. So you can turn up at the Dallow Road Community Centre tomorrow in Luton. That's on Saturday, the 20th of July. And we'll be starting at midday, inshallah. It's a 4 or 5 hour long program, but it's something that inshallah, if you come with an open mind, come with the intention to learn, you'll really leave the room understanding what you need to do and how and why you need to go about it. Brother Ahmed, do you have any questions?
So I was just going to say, apologies. I was listening attentive to yourself. We're just trying to get hold of Brother Rashid Mughradia, CEO of the British Council of Hajjis. The couple of things I wanted to ask. Yeah. The event you've mentioned, there's one in Luton. Did you mention there's also one in Peterborough?
That's right. There's one in Peterborough as well, and there's a couple of events we're doing this weekend, and it'll be myself and Sheikh Suleiman Ghani holding the session in Luton tomorrow.
Okay,
and would strongly encourage people to join. We've got a lot of people joining already, so it's not going to be an empty venue. We have a lot of people joining already, but we really want to make sure that everyone benefits from this. And it could be aunties and uncles, brothers and sisters. Last year, we had a variety of people who had joined the seminar and really benefited from the knowledge that we were sharing when it came not just through the practical aspects of the Hajj, but also, when it came to understanding why you actually do the Hajj. And this is where it becomes really interesting for me, Amir Bhai.
Yeah.
Is
Go ahead.
When people start to understand, oh my goodness, so this is why I pray 2 rakat behind the Maqam Ibrahim. And if you don't know what Maqam Ibrahim is, you're going to learn what that is and the significance of the Maqam and why it's there. Now, visualize this with me. So if you visualize the Kaaba right now, you're going to visualize a almost cube-like structure And right by the Kaaba, there is a golden kind of station.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's because usually you'll see images of the Kaaba, and every time you get a nice close-up shot, I think it's a gold brass style cover with glass sides. Is that correct?
Exactly, and it's a kind of vertical structure that goes in, and that contains the imprint of the foot or the feet of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And actually the Maqam Ibrahim is, never used to be so far away from the Kaaba. I mean, the Maqam is the station, is the area where Ibrahim alayhi salam stood. And it is said that, there were stones and rocks there where he and his son Ismail effectively, built the original foundations of the Kaaba.
Yes, wow.
Now, it's interesting though, when you read the history, even about the Maqam, where it is today, it isn't where it was at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Maqam Ibrahim was actually right next to the Kaaba. It was right next to it. But if you go there today, and for those of you who have been on Umrah and Hajj who are listening right now, you'll notice that the Maqam is actually several feet away from the Kaaba.
Yes, yeah.
And it was actually, Umar radiallahu anhu who ordered for the Maqam to be moved away from the Kaaba purely for logistical reasons. And that logistical reason is congestion. There were so many people, so many, mashallah, Muslims that started to do tawaf around the Kaaba, even at the time of our rightly guided caliphs, that it was Umar radiallahu anhu that actually ordered for it to be moved in order that the people could do tawaf more easily.
Wow, subhanAllah,
today,
that's fascinating.
And in the seminar, you learn about this, and you learn a lot more as well. That's just the beginning. That's a taste of what you learn in terms of the Maqam Ibrahim, but there's so many other amazing secrets of the Kaaba. And when people mention secrets and they're talking about Islam, you start to think that they're going to start turning the lights off.
Subhanallah, yeah.
When I talk about secrets, I'm saying about stuff that's a fact about the Kaaba that not many Muslims, even Muslims who do Umrah, mashallah, every year, and they pay the extra 2,000 dirhams these days as a fine, even they don't know these secrets. And you really have to study the Kaaba to understand some of the special parts about it. Like, for example, there is a water spout on the roof of the Kaaba.
I've seen that. I've seen some images of that. So, as far as I can tell, isn't that supposed to help drain the rainwater?
Absolutely, you're spot on. That's exactly what it's meant to do. And believe it or not, that not the exact same golden water spout that you see today, but in the same location there was a water spout at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when it used to rain, used to stand under it and used to have the rain,
yeah, I've heard that, yeah,
and the water drip on him. And now, imagine you're doing the tawaf. Imagine you're going around the Kaaba and you look up to that water spout. You will think of those images in your head. If you know exactly what these things are for and what the Prophet ﷺ said about these things and did with these things. And if you don't know these things, these secrets, then you won't benefit from that appreciation and that extra spiritual connection that we as Muslims should try our best to actually endeavor for and to get even closer to Allah. After all, we are visiting the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should try our best to understand more about it and to understand that actually there are things about the Kaaba that even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the Quran. I mean, there is a place, for example, there's a Kaaba in every heaven. Did you know that, Amir Bhai?
Subhanallah, yes. From my limited knowledge, that there is the Kaaba, it's just the earthly Kaaba, and then there's a heavenly Kaaba where the angels gather. Maybe I'm wrong, sorry, so please correct me if that's...
No, you're absolutely right. And Bayt al-Ma'mur. And this is the place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions Bayt al-Ma'mur in the Quran.
He does, yeah, subhanAllah.
And what's amazing is that, directly, the scholars tell us that directly above the Kaaba on earth is the Kaaba in the heavens. So now, subhanAllah, imagine you're doing tawaf around the Kaaba in Makkah, and you look up towards the heavens. You can imagine, subhanAllah, that there is another Kaaba, maybe more than one Kaaba, in the heavens, where there are 70,000 angels entering and worshipping Allah and then leaving, and never are they to enter again. That is the number of angels that are actually visiting this sacred house, not on earth, but actually in the heavens. So all of these things are very special, and these are the things that we touch on when we cover the Hajj seminar. But of course, the purpose of the seminar is to teach everyone how to perform a perfect and accepted Hajj, a Hajj Mabrur.
Inshallah.
And the Prophet ﷺ said that anyone who completes a accepted Hajj, it's as though they have all of their past sins forgiven, and it's as though they are like a newborn baby. So subhanAllah, the significance of the Hajj cannot be underestimated, and the significance of actually taking our time in terms of learning how to perform it perfectly should also not be underestimated. For example,
agreed. I mean, it's one of the things. Apologies, I'm sorry, I'm disrupting you there. No. Just one of the things that was quite important to remember is many of us now, with the cost of Hajj is getting a little bit more. Many of us will just be able to do it once, and you're absolutely right to get the ability to learn it, learn the rituals of the Hajj, learning and understanding its significance, the spiritual aspect of it as well. Is it more important?
Yeah, I mean, look, in this day and age, if we're going to buy a new mobile phone, or we're about to look for a brand new car or a second-hand car, we're going to learn about those things, right? We're going to learn what
absolutely.
We're going to learn what features that the new phone that I'm looking for has. Does it have a front-facing camera? How many megapixels is it? We're going to do all this research.
Of course we are. Yeah, absolutely.
And then we're going to go on the internet. We're going to go onto all the websites and find the best price and blah, blah, blah.
Read all the reviews, of course.
Effort. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Absolutely right.
Exactly.
Yeah, spot on.
And if we're about to embark upon the journey of a lifetime, it's so important that we take our time to learn how we can do this perfectly. Because, Hajj is one of those things that when you go in and you dive in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala notices. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes your life. It's very rare for a Hajji to perform Hajj and then to come back and live the same life. And a common thing I hear from people, they say, you know what, bro, I'd love to go on Hajj, but I don't think I'm ready.
SubhanAllah, yeah.
What I say to those people is that you will never be ready with that kind of mentality. Because there's some people that I've met who felt they were not ready, but when they came back from that Hajj, SubhanAllah, they look like different people, they behave like different people, and all of a sudden, they had their priorities in order. And this is the virtues and something special that comes from Hajj, and only for those people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. And I pray that for those of the listeners who are listening right now, who are actually planning on going on Hajj this year, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for them, accepts their Hajj, and also, that I really would request that everybody who's listening right now, if you've been inspired by this, do join us in Luton tomorrow at the Dallow Road Community Centre. We kick off at 12 o'clock, inshallah, and it's going to be an action-packed, quite an intensive 4 to 5 hour long course, where not only will we go through the theory, but we're also going to go through the practice, We'll also show you how to put on the ihram, which is the ihram is actually, technically speaking, the intention, but we also refer to the ihram as the white garment that men wear.
Sorry, Abdullah Kurbai, we're coming, obviously, thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
We're coming to the end of the show, and I want to say, again, from everyone here in Inspire FM, thank you for giving us your time. I know you were heading down to the studio to take part, to lead the show. You are being sorely missed. I want to say Assalamu alaikum from here, everyone, from Inspire FM. And keep us in your du'as, and inshallah, we'll hope you see you soon. Wa alaikum salam. Brothers, that was Friday Night Live. And listen to Inspire FM.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We stream our daily broadcast on inspirefm.org. You'll find all our daily updates on our social media at Inspire FM Luton.